This is ADHD Self-Mastery. Customized solutions for your unique brain with Bonnie Mincu, Senior Certified ADHD Coach. If you have traits of ADD or ADHD, you may struggle with getting started on a task or planning a project. Maybe you're easily overwhelmed or perpetually late, miss deadlines, or can't get organized. Bonnie brings you concise, tangible strategies and solutions to help you break through these challenges and accomplish your goals. ADHD Self-Mastery starts now.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Mincu, Senior Certified ADHD Coach and founder of Thrive with ADD. You're listening to ADHD Self-Mastery. Do you have a hard time making decisions? Most of us need to make mini decisions every day. Like, what time do I need to leave home to get to an appointment on time? Do I want to buy the large or the small container of a new detergent? Should I email someone again after I didn't get a response the first time? And how long should I wait so it doesn't look like I'm nagging them? That was 2 decisions. I've been going crazy these days, having to make lots of decisions about what color to paint my walls before putting my house on the market to sell. And I finally got so sick of it that I decided to do almost everything in the same shade of white. But wait, there are hundreds of shades of white. Well, I picked the one that, according to a decorating magazine article I saw online, was the favorite of decorators this year. My dilemma was one that was found to cause buyer's paralysis in all kinds of people: the problem of too many options. There was a study done in a supermarket with flavors of jam, and shoppers in the supermarket at certain times were presented with a display of 30 flavors of jam, and they were encouraged to sample them. At other times, shoppers were given a similar display, but with only 6 flavors to sample. Now, in the huge display of 30 flavors, only 3% of people purchased the jam. But when there were just 6 flavors to sample, 30% of people purchased. What that showed is too many options were just overwhelming and brought about analysis paralysis. So if you need to make a decision where there are lots of options, think of how you can narrow them down to just 2 or maybe 3, 5 at most. A good way to do that is with deal breakers. A deal breaker is a quality about one or more of the options involved in your choice that's a negative thing, something you don't want. In the example of having to choose a white paint, I could say, I don't want anything that would look gray. So I'd rule out shades that look gray compared to other shades. And a shade that might look gray would be a deal breaker for me. And to go even further with that, I could say I wanted my white to be a warm white rather than a cool white. And that would rule out a lot more shades. The real problem in decision making for many of us with ADHD is a lack of confidence that you're making the right decision. And that comes from not knowing how to decide. If you tend to be self-critical, you can imagine yourself having a character living in your head. I call him Critical Calvin. And he might pop out to criticize or second guess any choice you make. If you choose cherry jam, he'll jump out at you in the checkout line and say, why didn't you order blueberry? And when you're constantly second guessing yourself, that's pretty paralyzing. So you need a process where you can be confident that you made a decision based on the criteria that matter to you. Imagine you had to pick a jam from your supermarket shelf that you've never purchased before, and there are lots of flavors and different brands. What criteria could you use to decide? Start with the deal breakers to cut down the options to a fewer number of contenders. Maybe your deal breakers are high fructose corn syrup. That's an undesirable ingredient for healthy eating. Or a high price compared to the value, or ugly packaging that you wouldn't want your guests to see on your table, or a flavor your child won't eat. Now that you've used those deal breakers to narrow down the choices, you can use criteria to judge the choices of jam that are remaining in the running. And here likely criteria are flavor, calories, price, nutrition or natural ingredients, preference of your family members, perhaps especially attractive packaging, or a unique flavor you're just curious to try. Now, you may somewhat unconsciously do this kind of thing in your head when you have to make a buying decision. But if you struggle with decision making, having all this information just swirling around in your head is confusing. Imagine how much easier it would be if you could magically see it all on paper, maybe 5 different jams with points given to each of your important criteria. You'd be able to see which jam was the winner by which one got the top points. Now, of course, you're not likely to ever get this analytical about jam, but just to visualize this as an example of a framework for decision making, if you were to create a chart to help you make this decision, you would have the 5 jams in the running down the left side of the chart. And you'd write all the criteria in column headings going across the top of the chart. Then you could give each jam points or check marks or plus or minuses, or whatever phrase you might want to write in each box to indicate their relative benefits along the lines of those criteria. And then give a total score for each jam based on what you wrote on each one of the criteria. If you're using points, you would just add up all the points in each row for the totals, and the jam with the highest number of points is the winner. Now, in reality, for jam, if your criteria has them coming out more or less equal when you total them up, then it really doesn't matter which one you choose. What's important is you keep that critical Kelvin character in your head quiet. Pick any one of those options when it doesn't matter, mentally commit to your choice, and then move on with your life. But what about a major life decision? How would you go about deciding when it really does matter? Well, this is where a framework for deciding is really important. Let's take a short break and I'll show you a process to use that you can create just on a piece of paper.
Do your ADHD tendencies get in the way of you doing what you intend to? Traditional strategies for getting things done may not work for you. You need solutions tailored for your unique brain. In Bonnie Mincu's training membership program, Productivity Pathfinder, learn ADHD self-mastery step by step at your own pace in a supportive community with live online options each week. Learn more about Productivity Pathfinder at thrivewithadd.com.
Welcome back to ADHD Self-Mastery. I'm Bonnie Mincu, and we're talking about a process for decision making. I want to show you a way you can get your thoughts about a decision down on paper, and it's a way that makes it easier to evaluate your options. I've just walked you through how to create a little chart to help you decide among several options, laying out several different criteria. Now, there's one thing that could trip you up when you try to make a decision using just the facts for analysis. And that's when you add up the points of each of your options and you pick your winner, and then you realize you didn't want that option to win. When that's the case, you probably didn't take your own feelings into account. So be sure to add any criteria that captures how you feel about any of the choices, because sometimes your own feelings or emotions can be the most important criteria of all. And in fact, when you consider your feelings up front, that can be a useful deal breaker to narrow down the options from the very beginning. Now let's look at a way to evaluate a more life-changing decision. And instead of several options, we'll use this to compare 2 possibilities where you need to move in either one direction or another. So imagine you need to decide to either buy a house or to continue renting. And it helps here to do a side-by-side analysis of each option using the same criteria for each. And that way you won't be comparing apples to oranges. And you can compare buying versus renting using criteria of the investment required, the commitment required, equity and tax advantages, and the housing market risk. So in this case, you would take a piece of paper or do it on screen if you prefer. You draw 2 lines down the page. So you're going to have 3 columns. The left side column is where you list the criteria. Then you'll label the top of the second column buying, and the third column is renting. And then draw a line across under those column headings. For your first row under the column headings, write investment required on the left in that left column, And then you might write a brief comment about it in each of the option columns. So thinking it through, buying a house requires taking money out of savings for your down payment. And if you rent, that money could stay invested longer, gathering interest. If you were to evaluate each of these using points, your points would vary based on current interest rates. If interest rates are low right at the moment, well, that's a good time to buy. Next row, write commitment required as the criteria. If you buy a home, it's probably best to remain there for several years, since each time you move, you might have to get a mortgage, pay the movers. It costs money. When you rent, you can just leave at the end of your lease. Regarding equity and tax advantages, you build equity when you own a home, and you might get a tax break on the interest you pay on the mortgage. Here's where you might want to check with your accountant or even Google on the subject to be sure of the prevailing tax law. When you pay rent, all the money you pay is gone. And in the housing market, for risk, there's always some degree of risk. The price of real estate could go up or down dramatically with the economy or due to unexpected situations like COVID. And those factors could affect rent as well. If you own your house and the market drops dramatically, you could end up owing more to your mortgage than the house is worth. And when you rent, you do have the possibility of moving to a cheaper place if the rents go up. Now, so far, we've just compared practical considerations. What are your feelings about owning a home versus renting? One critical factor that may matter to you is having the freedom to renovate your own space. And if so, enter a criteria called freedom to renovate. When you own your own home, you can renovate it and decorate it the way you choose, limited only by your budget. With a rental, you need your landlord's permission, and when you leave, you will not see a return on that money that you spent. Now, ultimately, your heart wants what your heart wants, and if you've always longed for your own home, a rental won't give you that same feeling. But if you crave more freedom at this stage in your life, you may not want to be tied down to owning a home. And if you rent, you can just pack up and move at any time. Now, add any other considerations you can think of to compare these two options. And you have a rational way here to think through what to do, to talk it through with someone else, and to revisit it. And your thoughts about this important decision aren't just swirling around in your head. If you tend to ruminate, you may be concerned that you won't make the right decision no matter what. Well, there's never a guarantee for anyone. We don't have a crystal ball. But you've turned what could be endless ruminating into constructive problem solving. And that should give you a sense of control over the decision process. Practice using this decision model for any decision you need to make, even really trivial or personal ones. I actually developed this model while I was coaching a high school boy who couldn't decide who to take to the prom. So it works for anything. Not knowing how to decide is just one way that people with ADHD can get paralyzed in moving forward. Similar ways of getting stuck could be in prioritizing, in figuring out how to manage your time or your projects, or even figuring out how to think through a situation. There are answers and tools for all of these. The challenge is in learning the strategies that work for you. I'll be continuing to tell you more about some tools and resources and models for thinking things through. But my affordable Productivity Pathfinder monthly membership program starts out by helping you do that and provides training, coaching, and support in your journey to ADHD self-mastery. You can read about it and join at productivitypathfinder.com. This is Bonnie Mincu of Thrive with ADD. Please subscribe to this podcast, ADHD Self-Mastery, for more customized solutions for your unique brain.
Learn more about Bonnie and her Productivity Pathfinder training program for ADHD adults at thrivewithadd.com.